Self-Handicapping, Riley Glasson's social psychology final project. Do you want to study with us for the exam Friday? I think I'm going to wait until Thursday night. Are you sure? There's a lot of stuff on the study guide. Yeah, I'll be fine. I have a friend's birthday party Wednesday, but I don't think I need to study that much. This is an example of self-handicapping. Self-handicapping refers to actions or statements we make that allow us to avoid effort or responsibility for potential failures that could damage our self-esteem. It is much more embarrassing and harmful to our self-esteem to put forth effort and fail than it is to handicap and have excuses as to why we failed. When we self-handicap, our decisions and actions provide us with a way to internalize success while externalizing failure. In other words, self-handicapping lets us take credit for our successes while blaming external factors for our failures. My dad is a big golfer. I refused to go golfing with him for years until I finally caved. The first question I asked him wasn't how to hold a club correctly or the right form of a swing. It was, how is this going to be a fair game? You are obviously better than I am, to which he replied, you get a handicap, like an adjustment to make the game fair between us. This is the first thing I thought of when I read about self-handicapping. If I would have lost that game without playing with a handicap, I would have immediately told my dad, well, of course you won. I've never played and you were stronger than me. The statement itself reflects self-handicapping. If I would have practiced really hard and lost, that would have been much worse than being able to avoid defeat by using my lack of practice and stature to defend my loss. By not practicing or putting any effort before, I am able to self-handicap myself and blame my failure on external factors. I interviewed a few other students at the University of Colorado to see instances they have experienced self-handicapping. First, I interviewed John Moores, a sophomore at CU who is majoring in communication. He spends his free time doing things with his fraternity or hitting the slopes with his friends. He had never heard of self-handicapping nor ever taken a psychology class before. I explained to him, self-handicapping, simply defined, is when you avoid putting effort into something so the failure that follows can be blamed on an external factor. When is the time that you found that you self-handicapped yourself?
Well, if I could think of a time, there was a time where my friends asked me to go skiing. It was the day before my test, and I thought maybe if I just went and didn't study for my test, I was going to do bad on the test either way, so I decided to go skiing with my friends. The next day I got my test back, and I didn't do so well. My friends did a lot better than I did, but yeah.
John self-handicapped himself by going skiing instead of studying for his test. This gave him an external factor to blame his bad grade on instead of just admitting he didn't know the material. Next, I interviewed Margot, a junior at the University of Colorado Boulder. She had heard of the term before but didn't know too much about it.
I once had a job interview early in the morning on a Friday that I was really nervous about. I knew it was a super competitive position and had expressed to my friends how scared I was that I wasn't going to get the job. They invited me to go out with them, but also told me they understood if I wanted to stay and rest for my interview. My thought process was that this job is such a high demand, I probably won't get it anyways. I might as well have a fun night, even if it makes waking up difficult. When I had to wake up for my interview, I was not well rested at all, which made me very tired, and I only had a little time to get ready. I did not perform as well as I could have on my interview and used going out as my excuse. I see how this was an example of me self-handicapping because I gave myself an excuse for not getting the job.
From interviewing two of my peers, it was evident that we all find ourselves in similar and expected situations for our demographics. We feel the need to self-handicap for tests we aren't prepared for and to avoid embarrassment or harassment from our friends. However, I was curious to explore how self-handicapping is reflected in a group that dealt with different reasons for the urge to self-handicap. I reached out to the most organized, prepared, and meticulous people I know, my mom. Explaining the concept to her was quite interesting. I wanted to downplay the negative connotations behind self-handicapping in order to avoid a biased response. Instead of telling her directly how self-handicapping involves avoiding effort in the hopes of keeping potential failure from hurting self-esteem, I asked her to think of an example of a time she wasn't successful in an endeavor. She recalled a time she had a big charity event she had to work and started early in the morning and continued through the entire day. She expressed how the whole day was less organized than anticipated because she couldn't keep her thoughts straight and kept leaving tasks uncompleted or not up to standard. She discussed how stressed and nervous she was for this event and how she stayed up all night worrying and thinking about it. What really caught my attention is what she said. I kept thinking how staying up late worrying about it is only going to make me more tired and weak the day of the event, and that's exactly what happened to her. This is when I introduced her to the concept of self-handicapping. I explained how by staying up late when she knew she needed to rest in order to be successful, she was giving herself an excuse or a handicap, and that's what made the event not run perfectly. She immediately was stunned by the accuracy of this concept, and even her actions that were partially unintentional she saw reflected self-handicapping. My research on the concept of self handicapping led me to the conclusion that self handicapping isn't exclusively to any specific age, gender, or race. A wide spectrum of people, when introduced to the concept of self handicapping, can recall a time in their lives where they were guilty of setting themselves up for failure with an excuse waiting for them. Learning and seeing examples of how nearly everyone can recall a time they self handicapped themselves greatly relates to one of the ideas of psychology that I have taken away from this class. I believe that when you learn about the theories, concepts, studies, and everything else involved in psychology, you are able to see it reflected in your own life and the lives of people around you. Whether it's observing de individualization when scrolling through Facebook or finding myself getting sucked into the bystander effect, the knowledge of psychology opens up an entirely new lens to the world.